Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my library. Today, I am doing something a little different. I haven't talked about books in a while, and I thought that I would do that today because I have a lot of books that I want to read in 2024. So let's get into them. I know a lot of people are doing like the 24 books I want to read in 2024. I don't think I have quite that many. I didn't want to have like a set number because I was a little worried that I would kind of hyper focus on it and just worry that I wasn't getting it all done. So we're not going to do that. But I do have quite a few books that I want to talk about. Some of them are brand new for 2024. Some of them are previously released books, but are new to me that I haven't read yet. And a couple of them are rereads. So these are all books that I really want to read this year. Obviously, I'm going to be reading more than just this. I tend to read like 50 books a year. It just kind of varies. I'm not setting a challenge this year because I don't want to. And I want to say under 20, but I'm not entirely sure how many I have. So this is just the ones that I really want to get to, but I'm obviously going to read more as well. So without further ado, let's get started on this. I'm going to start with the brand new releases that are just coming out in 2024 or at some point later this year. And then I'll move on to the new to me books and then the rereads that I also want to do this year as well. So let's get started. The first book is called Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, and it is a literary fiction novel, I believe, and it's about a man named Cyrus who kind of starts becoming interested in murders in history, like Joan of Arc and a few other people. And it kind of impacts his family history. So I'm really curious about this one. I've actually been really into literary fiction lately. It's not a genre that I would have said I was interested in a few years ago, but I've actually noticed that my reading preferences have changed quite a bit. So I want to make a video about that at some point too, but literary fiction is one that I'm really into right now. So I figured I would add some to my list this year. The next one is a historical fiction, and it is by Kristin Hanna. It's called The Women. I love Kristin Hanna's writing. I read The Nightingale a few years ago, and that just had me sobbing. I loved it so much. I'm really excited to read this one. The book is about a couple of women during the Vietnam War and where they kind of enlist to help out. And it's about their story. Kristin Hanna's books all tend to be historical fiction. I've only read The Nightingale, but I do own The Four Winds. So at some point I'm going to be reading that as well. But yeah, I want to read more Kristin Hanna this year because historical fiction is another one that I really like. She tends to write really great characters, a lot of multiple POV books, which I also really like. So I'm looking forward to that one. The next one is a little bit different for me as well. It's called Who's Afraid of Gender by Judith Butler. And this one is a nonfiction book. And it kind of talks about how certain people tend to be a little intimidated by the thought of gender existing outside of the binary. And I just thought this was really interesting because you always hear people that are like, oh my God, what about, gender roles and all that stuff, which by the way is complete BS. But I'm interested in this book. I feel like it's really going to appeal to me because this is something that I've been really wanting to learn more about. So I'm curious to see what this book has to say. The next one is also a nonfiction book, and it's called Just Friends by, I hope I say their name right, Gyan Yankovich. And this one's another nonfiction. It's about the power and influence of friendship. I am somebody that cares a lot about my friends. I will do literally anything for them. So I thought this one would be a good one for me. Now we're going to jump genres again, and we're going to go to one that is definitely more what I have talked about in the past if you've seen any of my previous book videos, and that's fantasy. And I have to read Leigh Bardugo's new book. I love Leigh Bardugo so much. Any book that she writes is an insta read for me. I think you can kind of see Ninth House on my bookshelves over there, but anything that she writes is an insta buy, insta read for me. I love her writing very much. I don't think I've ever really rated any of her books that low. So I'm really excited. It's called The Familiar, and it's a historical fantasy set in the Spanish Golden Age. So that sounds really neat. Kind of a little bit of a departure from the Shadow and Bone series, which was kind of like Russian inspired. And then Ninth House, which is like a college inspired one, which I love Ninth House very much. So I'm very excited to read this one. I'm going to get it as soon as it comes out. and just, read it as fast as I can because I love her stuff. Next up is a sci-fi fantasy mystery. And if you have watched my previous videos, you've probably heard of this author before. And this is Stuart Turton. He wrote The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And now he's coming out with a new one called The Last Murder at the End of the World. It's another kind of like time skipping sci-fi fantasy mystery. I love the way he writes. I've read both of his books already. I've read Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and Devil in the Dark Water. I love both of them. Evelyn Hardcastle was a little bit better than Devil in the Dark Water, but I really did enjoy both. I thought they were great. There's usually some like historical elements to these books as well. I'm not sure if this one is. I actually haven't read much about it because I don't want to be too spoiled, but I know it's going to be like that typical Stuart Turton, it's a mystery, but it's not set exactly in realism. There's a lot of stuff to it that's going to be a little bit, magical or sci-fi or something like that. The last book that I want to read that is a new release this year is called The Kamogawa Good Detectives by Hisashi Kashiwai. Hopefully I'm saying that right. This is a Japanese book that's been, I believe, translated to English, and it's about it's about a father and a daughter who run a restaurant, and they're able to figure out dishes from somebody's past or foods from somebody's past just by hearing them explained. It sounds really neat, and also kind of reminds me of Food Wars, which is an anime that I really like. So I'm interested in this one. I also really like cooking and learning about different cuisines. So I thought this one would be a lot of fun. It looks like it's going to be very cozy, which, a lot of these other books are a little bit heavier. So I'm looking forward to something that's a little bit cozier. Now, let's talk about books that have been released already. They came out either last year or the year before. Some of them, I believe, even longer than that. But I haven't actually read them yet, and I do want to read them this year. So these are books that are new to me, and I actually do own a couple of them. So to get started, we have Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. I read Black Sun, which is the first book in this series, a couple of years ago for a book club that I was in, and it was one of my favorites of all of the books that we discussed in that book club. So I'm really excited to check this out because I want to see where this story goes. I loved the first book a lot. It's kind of in like a Native American-esque setting, which I love that because I feel like there's just not enough books that cover that particular culture, and I do want to see more of it. So I want to read this one and see where it goes because, like I said, I really liked the first book. Next up is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I've heard really, really, really good things about this book. It's another literary fiction. I want to say there's sci-fi elements to it, but I could be completely wrong there. This is another one that I actually did not read much about because I feel like literary fiction, especially, you kind of have to go into it not knowing a lot about the book. So I think I'm going to try and go into it like that here. I don't want to know too much, but I've heard very good things, and I am excited to see where it goes. Next up is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I've had this one on my TBR for a while now. It's like a cozy fantasy book about two former adventurers, I think, that just decided they don't want to adventure anymore. Kind of like D&D based stuff, which I love D&D, so I'm really excited about this. But they decide to run a coffee shop instead. And rather than doing the adventures themselves, they are serving and making coffee for people that are still adventurers and hearing stories and stuff. And I just think this sounds really cool. It sounds very cozy. And I know a lot of people really like this. So I'm looking forward to it. And as a D&D player, I think that I'm going to really enjoy this one. I actually have a feeling this is going to make my 5 stars for the year, but we'll see. Next up is The Will of the Many by James Islington. And I've heard, again, a lot of really good things about this one. I believe this is like a Roman-inspired book. I, again, don't know a ton about it, but I'm pretty sure it's Roman-inspired. And I've just heard amazing things about this. This is probably one of the few, like, fantasy books on my list this year because, like I said, I've kind of been moving away from epic fantasy. I feel like it's a little much for me now. I play a lot of D&D, I play a lot of Baldur's Gate 3, and I feel like I'm getting my epic fantasy from that right now. So trying to absorb more epic fantasy in book form is kind of tough for me. I actually don't remember if this one's epic fantasy or not, but it is definitely fantasy. I'm looking forward to it because I have heard very good things, but it is going to be one of the few fantasy books on my list this year, just because I'm giving myself a little bit of a break from it. Next is probably the most controversial on my list, because I know that there are a lot of people in different camps for this series. They either love it or they hate it. I really liked the first book, not gonna lie, but I know not everybody did, and I do want to read the second, and that is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Yes, I really liked Fourth Wing. Don't come at me. Don't at me. Don't yell at me. I thought it was fine, and I'm excited to read Iron Flame. I hear this one's a little slower. I know that my sister read it, and she said that it was a little slower, and my best friend also said the same thing, so I'm not sure how this one's going to go for me, but I do want to read it because I really did like the first one, so I'm excited about that. That's all I'm going to say. Next is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennet, and I've been wanting to read a Robert Jackson Bennet book for years. I've heard so many good things. This one sounds really interesting. It's a fantasy novel with a heist, which I absolutely love. Six of Crows, the duology. So I'm kind of looking for that, because it's not like super epic fantasy, but it's got a lot of like fun, heists and magic and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to this one. I've heard great things. I believe it's a trilogy. So if I like it, I might try and read the other two before the end of the year, but I have to see how much time I have. But yeah, this is one I definitely have to get. I believe I already ordered it. It's just not here yet, so I don't have a book to hold up, but I am looking forward to that one. The next book I am really excited about, and that is The Bell in the Fog by AC Rosen. This is the second book in a series that follows a detective in the 1950s, but what's really interesting about this is it's LGBTQIA plus centered, which, if you know, back in the 1950s, the queer community was really looked down upon, and that is very apparent in this book, and it really adds to the story and to the lovability of the characters. There were so many characters in this book that even though some of them were not the most likable, you really wanted to root for them and just hope that things got better for them. The first book was called Lavender House. I absolutely loved it. I actually got it from the library, which I kind of wish I had bought it. I don't typically buy mysteries just because the rereadability of them is not always the highest. And I like to have books on my shelves that I'm going to reread. So I don't tend to buy a ton of books. I tend to use the library a lot. And I did end up using the library for this, but I really kind of wish I did have it, because I do think I would go back and reread Lavender House. I really liked it, and I kind of want to go back and like pick up on some clues about what happened in that book. But I'm very excited about The Bell in the Fog. I am going to try and buy this one as well. I know my library does not have a copy of it, so that's just another reason for me to go and do that. And I would like to have all of them at this point, because I did like the first one. I think I'm going to like the second one as well. Next up is, oh, it's very shiny. This is a library book. Hang on. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. So Emily St. John Mandel, I don't think I'm going to hold this one up. It's so shiny that I don't want to. Yeah, it's really shiny. I'm going to have to sit here like this. It's fine. So Emily St. John Mandel is an author who I really started to love after I read Station 11. It's one of my all-time favorite post-apocalyptic novels. And she does a lot of literary fiction. She does a lot of like kind of sci-fi stuff along with lit fic. But I just really like her writing. I actually just recently read The Glass Hotel by her, which I will say was not as good as Station 11, but it was still decent. I liked it. I liked the writing. I hated all the characters, but I believe that was by design. I don't think you were supposed to like any of them. And I'm excited about Sea of Tranquility. Again, I'm going into this book not knowing much. I did the same thing with The Glass Hotel. I did the same thing with Station 11. You really don't want to go into Emily St. John Mandel's books knowing too much about them. I feel like it really helps to go into it not knowing anything at all. So I'm excited to read this. I'm actually going to read it pretty soon, because I got it from the library. I got to read it in 3 weeks. So I'm going to read this soon. I'm just finishing up one other book, and then I'm probably going to get started on this. So I'm excited. It's going to probably be the first one on this list that I'm knocking out as well. So yay. Next up is one of my all-time favorite sci-fi authors. She does a lot of cozy sci-fi, which probably sounds kind of weird because you don't think sci-fi and cozy at the same time. And that is Becky Chambers. I have read her entire Wayfarer series, And I just adore that series so much. I actually do want to reread that one. That's a perfect series to reread because there's not a lot of mystery to it and it's just so cozy. I unfortunately only own one of the books, but I am going to remedy that because that's absolutely a series that needs to make it onto my shelf. However, I'm getting a little off track here. The book that I want to talk about now is called A Psalm for the Wild Built, and it is a new series by Becky Chambers. And I don't know a lot about this one as well. I just know it's more cozy sci-fi, which I absolutely love. I think it has something to do with like an android that was built by somebody and they go on adventures or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I could be completely wrong. It doesn't matter. I'm going to read it. I'm probably going to love it because I haven't read a single book by her that I didn't actually enjoy. They are just so cozy. They are the perfect book to like be on the couch with a blanket and a cup of tea, snuggling with your dog and just reading. I did that with all of the other books. I really like her writing. The characters are all so lovable. It's also a very character-centered sci-fi series, which again, sci-fi tends to be a little bit more plot focused. This one's more character focused. I'm looking forward to this one a lot. I think I'm gonna love it. It probably is gonna end up being on my 5 stars as well. I'm just speculating, but I think that that's gonna be how it goes. And now I have a nonfiction book, which this one's a huge departure. I think aside from like Who's Afraid of Gender, this is a huge departure from everything else that I'm reading. However, I kind of have a really odd fascination with religious extremism. And I've kind of been following some people that talk about that. And I've kind of just been interested in why people that are part of like religious fundamentalism or extremism think the way they do and like what just makes them tick. Like I just want to know. And so I decided I wanted to read Breaking Free by Rachel Jeffs. And she is the daughter of a religious cult leader. And she basically escaped and is now not part of that anymore. But it's her story of escaping and getting out of the life that she was born into. And it just sounds really interesting. Her father, if you've heard of him, his name is Warren Jeffs. He did run one of the Christian cults in the United States. I believe he's since been arrested, which, you know, great. But I'm really interested in this one because this one, it's it it's it's uncomfortable because these people have been through a lot, but it's just something that I feel like not a lot of people really know about. Like it's fun to sit there and laugh at, you know, these families who have like 75,000 kids and, you know, they all have to wear dresses and stuff like that, but it's actually a really dangerous mentality that they have. And I feel like it's important that the stories of the survivors get out, which also kind of off track again. I highly recommend watching Shiny Happy People on, I believe it's Amazon. It kind of covers this and it's just very interesting. And I feel a lot for the survivors, the people that got out, and then the people that are still stuck, hopefully when they can get out as well. But yeah, I just want to read a little bit more about this and get a little bit more educated about it myself because I feel like it's something that is a topic that should be discussed, especially if you live in the United States. And finally, the last book that I want to read that is a new to me book, but is not a new release by any stretch of the imagination, and that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I've read a couple of her books. I really like her writing. And this one, I believe, is based off of Mayan mythology. I've been wanting to read more mythology retellings, which I'm going to get to in a second about another one that I want to read. And this one I've seen come up a lot in different lists of mythology retellings that people should read if they're interested in that. So I want to give this one a shot as well because I don't know a lot about Mayan mythology. I could tell you a lot about Greek mythology, Roman mythology, but those are the ones we all learned in school. I feel like I didn't learn anything about Mayan mythology and I kind of want to read more about it because it seems really interesting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one and I will probably be getting to this one soon because I've been itching for a mythology book. And finally, I want to just talk about 2 series that I want to reread at some point this year. I may not get to every book in these series because they're long, but I want to at least try because these are two series that I really like. The first one is the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. I actually only recently read this. I want to say like 5 years ago for the first time, and I was already like in my 30s by then. So I went into this reading it as an adult, but I still really love this book. I love this series. Rick Riordan is a fantastic human being. I actually want to read more in this whole like universe of his, but I just want to start by rereading the Percy Jackson series because I really do love it. I have been trying for years to get both of my kids to read this too because they both have ADHD, and my younger son is actually into Greek mythology. So I'm like, "Oh my god, please read this. You need to." But as much as it pains me to say this, neither of them like reading. It's something I'm working on, but I don't want to force it either. So yeah, I'm going to reread this because I love it, and I do want to start reading more Rick Riordan in general, so I figured this was a good place to start. And the last series that I would like to reread is Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin. This is one of my all-time favorite series, and I haven't read it in several years now, and I love this series so much. It's a trilogy. There are 3 books to it, and I think I've given every single one of these books a 4.5 or higher. I adore this series. It's about a middle-aged kick-ass mom, which I appreciate because, you know, that's me. Maybe not so kick-ass, but I am a middle-aged mom. So, you know, it's perfect. And I just love N.K. Jemisin's writing. I'm actually currently reading the second book in the Great City series right now. And just rereading her other books is making me want to reread Broken Earth. So I'm going to do that this year. I'm actually going to make this a priority because they're just so good and I love them so much. N.K. Jemisin, along with Leigh Bardugo, is probably another instant buy author for me. I haven't read a single thing that I don't like from her. So I'm really excited to read Broken Earth again as well. All right, so that wraps up my books that I want to read in 2024. It's a pretty big list, but like I said, I typically read about 50 books a year. So this is probably a little less than half of what I'm planning to read. So I think we're good. I think I'm off to a good start. I'm excited to get this year off with a bang. I did not read a lot last year because a lot happened that I don't want to get into in this video, but I'm ready to get back into it now, and I'm excited to talk about books again. I'm going to be doing more book-related videos on my channel, so stay tuned for that. I'm also going to be making a video about games that I want to play in 2024 as well. So since I'm doing one for books, I'm also going to talk about some video games that I want to play in this year as well. So I'm hopefully going to have that out soon. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time. Bye!